Well, g'day. Ross Thatcher here. Flat Earth Aussie Jesus coming back a little bit more sober this time on reflection. Not going to go through the um, what do you call it, word pad to read the comment. That was a bit long and unsatisfactory. Turn the brightness down a little bit there. So xForbidden Gaming sent a repeat of his copy and paste. I think it's not all repeat, not all copy and paste, but I really didn't do it justice the other day. So I'm going to actually seriously address one or two of the things he got to in a slightly more sober state of mind. He starts off with, here are very basic observations that not a single flat Earth model is capable of addressing. You flat earthers keep saying the burden of proof is on scientists, despite every single piece of evidence points to the Earth's true shape, a sphere. Well, I'll tell you something, mate. Flat earthers would not even be existing today if all the available evidence pointed to the shape of it being a sphere. In fact, everything that we've looked at diligently, critically, again and again and again, show nothing of the sort. There's nothing spherical about any of the observations we can make. Nothing about the nature of water will conform to the outer edge of a sphere. That is sheer and utter nonsense. Once again, I don't have one handy. I know I've got one around somewhere. But we can all imagine a ball in our hands. Hold a ball. Let's call it a globe. You got America on one side, you got China on the other side, you're holding it in your hands. What have you got between them? You got this massive lump of water that would be thousands of miles high. Does that comport with any sort of reality whatsoever? I'll get back to you in a second, Vioda. What's that? Some sort of Hobbit name? Vioda. Yeah, I am sober, mate. I might be having a beer, but hey, it's a day off. So this amazing amount of spherical water does not comport with anything in reality, with anything to do with our observations whatsoever. Nothing we fill with water goes higher than the edges that contains it and retains some sort of sphericity. Impossible. That is why all the edges of your swimming pool, all the edges of your bathtub, all the edges of your bowl, all the edges of your coffee cup, your sink, your lake, the oceans are all higher than water level, because that's how it gets contained. If it was making thousands of miles high bulges of water between continents, that water would seek to flatten itself out. That's just what it does. You can invent this whole insane theory of being pulled towards the center, but that is nonsense. You know it if you have half a decent working brain cell inside your cranium. So globies, you completely lose on that one alone. Now, if we're going to say that that still follows the curve, because everywhere is on top, right? Do you feel like you're on the side or upside down on the ball? No. You always believe you are on top. So everybody believes they're on top. So therefore, if we follow this curve, then everything that's still on top is below this water level, which is itself on top from its perspective. And so you're actually well below the sea level. That makes zero sense as well. Land is demonstrably that which is above sea level. That's how we determine the height of mountains, of plateaus, of anything, is feet or meters above sea level, not meters above the lowness of the curve, because it just does not make any sense whatsoever. So that's why we don't talk about it. Now, Theodore, the little hobbit here, who says, never mind astronauts and the ISS, right? You don't seem very sober. The International Fake Station proves nothing. It's in low Earth orbit. Even if it is real, as they say it is still in the Earth's gravitational field. It is said they are moving at 17,500 miles per hour, which is about 10 times the rate of a speeding bullet, which is invisible to the naked eye. But you think something going 10 times faster, we can just see it blipping across the sky, and that people can survive in such an environment, you mental fucking retard. Geez, I was going to try and behave myself with language too, but I guess you got my button pushed. No worries, a Russian author, Fyodor Dostoevsky, no worries. One question, how many viewers do you usually get? It's 2, 3 sometimes, just depends. Sometimes I might get 5 or 6. I'm not in it for live viewers. I'm just doing it because this is the way I make videos now, because I can't do it off my phone anymore. I don't have 1,000 subscribers. And this way I don't have to use up my own data or memory to record a video first. I can just go live and speak off the top of my head. So viewers live, that's not my interest at all. I'm just getting to the truth, and people can watch it later and see what I had to say. And I imagine you got another one. Have a good afternoon anyway. Will do, mate. Let's wish Ash Barty well at Wimbledon. I think the Cricket World Cup is already 85% Australian. I don't follow sport, mate. I don't have interest in that sort of stuff. It's more distractions, more things to distract us from the real world we live upon. That is why I consider myself an autodidactic expert in this particular matter, because I haven't been filling my head with just nonsense knowledge. I don't understand it, but I don't follow and learn sports statistics. I don't follow sporting teams. I don't care who wins or loses. None of that stuff matters to me. I'm interested in the nature of our existence, and that includes 100% the realm upon which we live. It is the single most important thing in our psyches, in our understanding of who we are. If we think we live on a spinning ball, it makes us something different from what we are if we know that we live on the only physical plane in existence. So, kill the hate, improvise a song, Ross. Hey, that's a good idea. I might have to. Except this microphone doesn't do well, I found. If I'm, it's a catch-22 on everything I do. The microphone don't work if I try to sing a song, but I can do it on my phone and it comes out okay. So, you like sports, it informs you about the nature of competition, history, and war. Well, that's fine. You do your thing, I'll do my thing. I'm interested in people more than the shape of the earth. Well, that's fine. Go and meet some people. I'm interested in the shape of the earth. This is me. I've always been a philosopher. I've always been a bit of a loner. I don't deny that. I don't think being popular and having lots of people around you is a sign of success. It might be for some people. If that's how you measure success, good for you. I'm happy for you. For me, it's about understanding the nature of reality. And for me, the shape of the earth is everything. So Mr. Forbidden One Gaming's next thing was saying, you mental kiddos are going against the majority, thus the burden of proof lies on all of you. Well, that's not true at all. Going against the majority, that's pretty much what every critical thinker, every new person that comes along and thinks differently and comes up with new ideas must necessarily be doing. By repeating the same mistakes over and over and expecting a different result, well, that's a form of insanity. We have to think differently, and it doesn't place any burden of proof on us if we are debunking what you claim is proof. And that's what it boils down to. You claim sphericity of the earth. We claim that we see no sphericity. You claim motion of the earth, massive motion of the earth. We claim no motion. Which one is apparent? Which ones are obvious? Well, we see no sphericity, we see no motion. Therefore, the burden of proof is on those making the claim. Other than that, we're left with the default position, which water, the very nature of water proves, is flat and stationary. Simple. So the burden of proof doesn't get placed on us who question the lies. If you can't prove your lies, which is what we set out to do in the first place, we think, oh, this will be a piece of piss. Flat Earth, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. Any child knows it's not flat. We live on a spinning ball. Everybody knows. Until you go and test it for yourself and find out, oh, well, where is this proof? I don't see it. Yeah, that's good, mate. You distracted me. Show me the dome. Show me the edge of the earth. Well, I did cover those ones the other day. when you go out and look at the stars at night, do they appear as though they're on a flat, level plane above you, or do they actually appear as though they may be within a dome? Well, I can say they certainly do look as though they might be within a dome, but it doesn't prove it's a dome. Of course, it could all be a matter of perspective, which makes a lot of sense because, I mean, why would the dome just be around my personal horizon, my personal place, which I just live on one tiny little speck of a dot on Australia. So, you know, it barely registers on a map the size of what I can see at any given time. So to see proof of a dome, well, maybe we'd have to look a little bit further at something like Operation Fishbowl. What were they doing then? Sending high kiloton nuclear weapons, assuming nuclear weapons actually exist and not just high kiloton dynamite. They were sending them up into the upper atmosphere to try and blast a bloody hole into it. Now, why would they call it a fish bowl? What sort of sense does that name have, Operation Fishbowl, if they're sending high kiloton nuclear weapons up into the upper atmosphere? Yeah, there's something in that name alone. Operation High Jump, well, that suggests they had to get over something quite high. Maybe it was a wall. Maybe it was a wall of ice. And so, yeah, when you say, show me the edge, that to me is the single most moronic request any globe head could possibly make. You have the wrong mentality of the realm that we probably live upon. We don't think of it as a disk in outer space. That is insanity. That's globe-derived insanity from your heliocentric beliefs. It's the only physical plane at the bottom of the known universe, potentially infinite. And if not, well, then it's quite a unique place where Antarctica is the actual outer limits as far as we can go. But I have very good reason to believe there's far more land further out from there. So you want to see an edge, just walk to a cliff. There's your edge. Jump off it, because that's the only one that the flat earthers are ever going to show you. There is no edge. Show me any proof at all that the earth is flat and can't be debunked or explained via the existing model. Well, we've already told you, water level. That land is demonstrably that which is above water level. That should be enough. The pressurized atmosphere, that sort of pretty well nails it as well. You can't have an atmosphere spinning with the earth surrounded by a vacuum. That is clearly an insane belief. You still have to have your go-to answer, go-to gravity. That answers everything. It pulls air that escapes gravity back down because it still has mass when it wants to. There's just nothing sensible about the idea of an atmosphere surrounded by a vacuum as the Earth is hurtling ridiculous breakneck speeds, while no flying vehicle ever has to take it into account. Well, it is said that the atmosphere is moving with us, which means it must be getting incrementally faster and faster the higher up you go. It is sheer and utter nonsense. On a perfectly still and calm day, you have to be saying, well, the air is moving at 1,040 miles per hour, but incrementally faster and faster as it gets higher up, just to create the sensation of being perfectly still. Then when you've got your various winds going different directions, hello, you've just debunked that concept, because some are going with the earth, some are going against, but they're all going with as well. Everything about that is insane. On a stationary earth, makes perfectly fine sense. Winds are just air currents created by the force of the sun going around the equator every day, once every 24 hours, which is why it's always overhead at midday, approximately, every day. We do live in time zones which don't adjust for that, but if you were to live by a sundial, midday would always be the middle of the day when the sun is overhead. Even if it appears to be further north or south, it will still create the shadow at 12 midday. We, for convenience and for trade and so forth, make the convention of time zones so that we can all agree when to start work, when to finish work, when to stop trading, blah, blah. It's a slave world. That's basically what time is all about. It's a slave mentality. It's all done to say, well, when do the slaves start work? When do they have their lunch break? When do they stop work? When do they have their holy days to celebrate and not have to work? It's all a throwback to slavery days, and we're just free-range slaves. And that's why the world is invented the way it is, with this heliocentric model, because it also gives you this concept of finite resources, of scarcity, of therefore supply and demand decides the price, rather than something just being always available. Now that we have the technology to grow all year round, we've got refrigeration, we've got transport, all we really need is food. We could have an abundance of food and everybody could have all they needed. Everyone could be living in a house. We have all this wealth. And so what do they do instead? They keep taxing us and sell us on this dream that, well, we're destroying this world, so we better keep looking for another one elsewhere, for Earth Take Two or something. Keep selling the dream of something in the future that's going to be the answer to all our dreams, and that we can keep living this stupid way, destroying this world, so long as we keep selling the dream. And how many people are living homeless? How many on the streets? How many are starving? How many die every day from starvation in this day and age? While NASA can spend $52 million a day pursuing the dream, send men and women to Mars. It's just sheer and utter nonsense, a huge waste of human resources, and we allow it. That's what Flat Earth is all about, is waking people up to the sheer and utter nonsense of this world they've created for us, so that we can start to build a better world for all of humanity here. This one, the only one we've got, the way it should be all along. Even the ISS, which is viewed by hundreds of thousands of people, defies the possibility of the Earth being flat. Well, no, it doesn't. It can work just as easily and as we observe above a stationary Earth. For us to say it's going 17,500 miles per hour as it's in free fall around us, we also have to assume that it's keeping up with the 66,600 mile per hour orbital rate that they say we are going around the sun. Now that is another form of insanity, to think that, oh, they're all just locked together in their little system. They don't really have to take into account those motions because they don't exist. That's why you never have to take into account the motion of the Earth. That's why Einstein developed this special theory of relativity and relative motion, and bent warped space-time. I mean, how bent was he to come up with that one? Ugh, the mind boggles. Anyone can see it with the naked eye buzzing across, and quite a few amateur people like you and me have personally taken pictures of it with extreme budget in telescopes. The response by flirters, it's CGI. No, I would explain it. If it's going 10 times the rate of a speeding bullet and going the 66,600 miles, ridiculous speed that the Earth is also going as it's falling in free fall motion around us, it's not even worth contemplating if you can even grasp the insanity of the belief that it is orbiting around us as we are doing those phenomenal speeds. But it could quite easily be some sort of drone or high altitude craft, remotely operated perhaps, or perhaps it is manned craft. Who knows? Maybe there is something up there filled with some big helium containers that keeps it aloft. It's got plenty of big solar panels to keep blowing some turbines around to keep it moving around and around. That would make far more sense than free fall motion, 17,500 miles an hour around a spinning ball hurtling through space at 67,000 miles an hour. Are you able to explain lunar phases and lunar eclipses on the flat Earth model? Well, yes, I can, and that's what I didn't get around to doing the other night, so that's what I'm going to basically get down to doing it now. It's really quite simple. The moon and, well, the sun is an unknown height. I don't know what height the actual sun is. It varies from day to day by a degree, and that difference in height, well, now it's coming back down since June 22nd, is a degree difference. So it's appears to be moving south as it gets lower. That's just what distance perspective does. It might take you a little while to get it into your head how it works. But if you've got something spiraling around and around and you shoot it away from you, it appears to make a smaller circle as it gets further away. And as it gets closer, it appears to make a bigger circle. That's pretty much what we see when we see in the sun. It appears to be spiraling back down towards us. So that's how the sun is working, by electrostimulation of the noble gases of our atmosphere, which causes them to glow as daylight around them. The moon is at a particular height where, for it, the sun never sets. Now, that's a simple matter of height perspective. The higher up you go, the more you will see the sun come back into view again after it is set. It's not getting set by curvature of the Earth spinning away from it and leaving the sun behind, because if it was, then going up is going away where you can no longer see it. You should be going back towards the sun, not up, away from the center of the Earth, which is what up is, and think you can still bring the sun back into view. It's simply just moved away because of distance, and convergence creates the obscurity point because the ground always rises to eye level. Law of convergence, everything sinks towards the center, which is where your eyes are. That's what the horizon is by definition. So you're just creating a further viewing point by getting higher. So if you get up high in an aeroplane and you zoom in on the setting sun, you'll see it to be a much tinier speck. You just don't see it from ground level, even at the top of a high mountain, because it's so insignificant, the amount of difference that you will actually see, that you won't see any noticeable angular size difference in the sun itself. So when we talk about the moon phases, then, the moon is an artificial satellite, 100% guaranteed. I know I've come up with some pretty far out hypotheses for where it came from, but it does appear to be made from Earth material. There are many different scientific hypotheses for what the moon is made of. Look them up. None of them agree with one another. Some say it was carved off the Earth from a meteor strike or asteroid. Some say it was dragged in from another part of the galaxy, or another galaxy altogether, by aliens. There's so many different hypotheses, but the most logical one, if it came from something on Earth, if our history as we know it is nothing at all as it really truly is, if giants really did exist at some stage, if there is this being called Satan who is being sentenced to spend out his days inside the Middle Earth, down where it's nice and hot, and that's his punishment for the Lucifer rebellion, by tricking mankind into believing that the sun, Lucifer the light bearer, is actually God, not the light of God. So there's many things going on here. But what I'm saying is that at a time, he was a mad scientist gone into major genetic engineering, bioengineering, and created all kinds of amazing monsters and human-like creatures, including giants. There's many stories about them. I'm not going to make this about that now. I'm just going to say that I think it's entirely possible that at one stage, when they blackened out the sun by chopping down all the giant trees and burning them, a time of great destruction, that that in itself created some sort of petrification process through all the ash and darkness. And that's why most of the nocturnal animals are the most prevalent ones to this day. Why we tend to eat the ones that could eat the grasses and plants and stuff that are unavailable to us to eat, because we just ran out of food, so we had to turn to becoming some sort of savages. Without fire, we probably wouldn't have survived for those, who knows how many, was it hundreds of years, thousands of years of utter darkness and, you know, brutal savage living, that we've finally now reached through that and lost memory of all the times before that. So we don't really know what's going on. But so my hypothesis is that, yeah, maybe in his mad scientist days, he was able to get, you know, a volcano, a perfect example of where you'd be able to do something like this, and take all this molten material that perhaps was mined from something that looks like a giant strip mine, which is what the Grand Canyon does look like, was able to somehow create this giant moon, an artificial hollow satellite that, when it cooled down rapidly. The expanding gases, as it cooled, left what we see to be as the craters, which is why they're all perfectly circular. They're not struck straight on by near misses of the Earth. They all had to come from the Earth. Nearly all these things that caused the craters, if there was an impact that caused it, no sideways ones on. They're all perfectly circular, exactly like you'd expect molten sort of material to do as the bubbles burst, like you see in, say, a mud lake that has bubbles coming up through it. So, yeah, I think the moon is an artificial satellite, and I've got reason to believe it was created some thousands of years ago by probably giants, and it's put up there as one of the reasons for when we lived in the giant trees, we could always see the sun. We were up high enough. The oxygen levels were massively higher. We lived a completely different sort of lifestyle in harmony with nature back then. Some of us may have been giants ourselves, for all we know. So, because there was no nighttime and there was no rain, the climate was all completely different because the trees absorbed and gave off all the moisture we needed. We had everything we needed at our fingertips, basically. We could live in these giant sort of net cities, basically. Some sort of different sort of paradise from what you could even imagine today. They talk about the time when we came down from the trees as though it's a bad thing, but maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all. So I think then that Satan did this as a way to mock us, to say, well, you used to have your sun visible 24 hours out of 7. How about I give you a sun and then you can worship me as your God because I am the giver of life and light and so on. And so the first one didn't really work too well. It got stuck in orbit around the sun. That's why we can hardly ever see it. But then we've got the one which finally did work, and it didn't quite work exactly. It was supposed to stay in perfect harmony to the sun so that it was always full, and so it would be a lesser light to rule the night. But we only get that now once a month. It's out of sync. It takes 24 hours and 50 minutes to go around us once. So when it is directly opposite the sun, that's the night it rises as the sun sets, which again are both due to perspective and distance. But we still use those terms because they work. It appears to rise, it appears to set. So at sunset, the full moon rises, and that's when we see it fully lit like a glowing lamp of some sort. Now, does the sunlight come from above and hit it? Quite possibly. That is why I say it's like a semi-opaque or semi-translucent, like quartz sort of thing. It glows, but it's not completely see-through. But so that one night of the month, it is fully lit. But every other night of the month, it's still fully lit by the sun, except the face facing the sun is out of kilter to us, looking at it from below. That is why when it rises 50 minutes later the next night, it is not quite full. There's a little dark patch on the opposite side. And if you see a moon during the daytime, you can always test this. So by the time it's half phase, you'll see it at daytime. Hold a white ball up in front of the moon and look at the shadow on the ball. It will be identical phase as the moon. So it's still a perspective thing. Sometimes you might think, how can the moon be shown like that when the sun's all the way down there and its light's over here? It's because the sun is still up as high as it always was. It just appears to be lower down. That's why the phases can seem a bit wrong if you don't understand perspective and height and how all that works. So I can see the comments are flying up here a bit. I might just read a couple real quickly. Will Smith played the role of the... Hang on. I'm sticking with... you made an assumption I'm a large part of hermit. I'm not a fan of sports, and people I learn about them is all the best. Is all the best. Well, that's good for you, mate. Yeah, you can go talk about sports on the sports page. I'm sticking with Pete Shea's cosmological theory. Aristarchus is clearly present on the moon and is a reflection of the source. Will Smith played the role of Barack Obama. Pete Shea is a lunatic. Oh, we've got a party pack in here. G'day, party pack. Fyodor Dostoevsky, Packer, Irish. Nah, I'm Irish. Nothing wrong with Irish. That comes from the word Ire, or Aryans. That's where the Aryans originated from, this island. That's why today they're still so heavily mocked, because have a guess who doesn't like the white race? The ones who actually brought civilization to all the world. Yeah, that's right. In the book I've read on this channel here called Secret of the Ages, you'll hear a bit more about them. These men with long beards, fair hair, pale skin, blue eyes, they introduced civilization to all the world. That's why all the great architecture of the world was made by them. I'd even go so far as to say that when they came to Egypt, they built the pyramids for them as a gift to show they come in peace. No shit. So yeah, the Aryans have been considered the constant enemy because of our intelligence, because of our wisdom, and because of our knowledge that we've had to try and keep hidden, and that keeps getting destroyed from us. That's what the Inquisition was all about, destroying all our knowledge, divide us, conquer us, introduce new races between us, wipe us all out, have people grow up with no memory, change our history, falsify everything, and make us think that the world is barely 6,000 years old and that this is it, that everything they tell us is true. We've been lied to on every level. You have to get right into Gnosticism to really get to the nitty-gritty of it all. But anyway, I'm talking about the moon here. Irish great workers. The Scottish invented everything, though. They have that who's like us poem. Oh well, at least we can agree that some wise men come from the north. All life apparently originates from the north, and there has been, from what I can gather, several different races of human beings that have inhabited the earth at different times, and they nearly always originate from the north. It kind of indicates something very special about that. I mean, who else do we have in fictional characters? Santa Claus lives in the North Pole. Superman comes from the North Pole. There's something Admiral Byrd himself discovered there. Very interesting story I read about him. When he first went to the North Pole, he got escorted by other flying vessels that came along and took control of his plane. He can no longer fly it. He went in and, anyway, that's another story. I'm getting back to the moon. So where were we? Talking about his lunar phases and lunar eclipses on the flat Earth model. Well, there we go. As I'm saying, as the moon gets closer and closer to the sun each day, it's basically the sun is catching up to it. But the sun is a constant 24 hours. The moon is 24 hours, 50 minutes. So, in effect, the moon is getting incrementally closer and closer to the sun, to the point that by the time it's a new moon phase, in just 2 weeks' time, it is, the whole lit side is now facing the sun. Now, the lit side only shows through the glowing gases of the atmosphere, the noble gases which glow, which give us daylight. Only the lit side is bright enough to show through those gases. The unlit side, not at all. That's why people say, well, we can see blue sky through the moon. Well, no, you can actually see the lit part of the moon through the blue sky. Everything we believe is just about nearly all arse backwards. So that's another one. So then every now and then, when the new moon catches up with the sun, or vice versa, the sun catches up with it, it will block it entirely and cause what we call a solar eclipse. And it only ever happens on the new moon phase. You don't see it coming across to block the sun because the lit side is facing the sun. So it does look as though there's nothing coming across to block the sunlight, but that's how it works. The lunar eclipse, on the other hand, only ever happens on a full moon phase. And that is why I say that there is a second moon that didn't go into orbit properly, the one that we call Rahu, that comes between the sun and the moon. The sun never goes below the earth. It's impossible for a light to go into the ground. That's a silly, nonsense, childish idea that the sun goes beneath us just because it appears to get obscured as it goes away into the distance. But another body can come between it and the moon, which is exactly how we observe a lunar eclipse if you've ever watched one. Now, I was a great believer in the globe when I went to watch a lunar eclipse, I don't know how many, over a decade ago at least. Probably 12 years. I knew exactly when it was coming. I've been using a lunar calendar for well over 20 years, 25 years now. So I know the moon phases quite intimately. I can tell you that at 5:17 a.m. this coming Wednesday morning, that's when our next new moon is actually going to be. Today being Monday, and it is now 5:19 p.m. How about that? Almost the opposite. Anyway, so yeah, we've just got, you watched as the shadow came across the moon. I thought I understood Earth, Moon, Sun relationship perfectly well. That's what I base my spirituality and connection with nature all about. All about knowing the moon phases, knowing the tides, knowing the seasons and how it all works. And so I went to watch an eclipse. It blew my mind to watch the shadow coming across from an angle. When the sun should have been behind us here and the moon coming up here in front, the shadow should have been coming up from the bottom, I would have thought, perhaps from the top down. That's what I was curious to see what it would do. Not come across at an angle that completely made no sense whatsoever. The third body, Rahu, coming across to cause that shadow is the only thing that can make sense. And there are many other cultures that have spoken about other celestial bodies. Even modern Western science believes in another planetary body. You know, they often talk about this thing called Nibiru, or what's the other name for it? They've got several names for it. Not coming to me at the moment. It's irrelevant. The point is, there are invisible celestials following the sun. The Chinese apparently call it the dragon, the head of the dragon being the fiery sun itself, the body being these, some say 6 to 8 invisible celestials that follow it, which some people claim to have seen from a plane before. I wouldn't know, I haven't seen it myself, but there are many examples where you sometimes see what appears to be a second sun at sunset, which cannot be explained by solar flare or lens flare, lens reflection. Many of them can, but not always. And so, yeah, I 100% believe that's what causes a lunar eclipse. So that's your explanation on the flat Earth model. Since you insist upon having one, that is it. If it's wrong, I know it's not up to you to prove it wrong, but it's still, if we can disprove or prove all your beliefs wrong about spin and curvature and pressurized atmosphere in a vacuum, I think then the burden of proof still comes back to you to say, to prove that it is the sun, the Earth's shadow causing the lunar eclipse. And one thing you might want to try as well is get a ball in daylight, get another ball on the ground, use that ball to make a shadow on the other ball. It doesn't come across as a straight line. Use a square piece of cardboard or, for sale sign you ripped off out of somebody's front yard and hold that across it. And the straight line makes the curved edge exactly as we see in the lunar eclipse occurring. So it's not a sphere necessarily making that shadow unless it's something up very, very high. And yeah, the shadow didn't even come across as a sphere the way I saw it. It was more of a straight line anyway. So, I don't know. So I think we can debunk the heliocentric model for why we have eclipses. And being able to predict them obviously still has the same predictive power as it's always been. That doesn't have to change just because we understand that we're the ones on the stationary plane while the celestials are all doing their celestial dance around above us. As far as I'm concerned, though, all the stars and the sun and even the moon, all in their own different times, but the stars are all moving as one body, are all going around Polaris. That is the center. That's the source of life. Who knows what Polaris represents? Maybe the pole star has some greater power than we have ever imagined. We worship the sun as God. Maybe it's Polaris. Well, what we see of it, I don't know. But all I'm saying is that all the stars go around Polaris. Now, if the center is the place of worship, why are all the stars worshipping Polaris? They say that they go the opposite direction once you get to the other side of the equator. Well, what is the equator? Basically, all our maps were originally made by sailors, navigators, who used Polaris to navigate with. And once they reached a certain distance from Polaris, it got so low into the horizon that it became obscured. So this obscurity point became a circle around Polaris, which is called the equator. What a coincidence. It also happens to be the very same path that the sun itself takes. What an amazing coincidence. It's almost as though it's divinely created or intelligently created, the fact that this happens. Now, the sun, as I said, goes up throughout the seasons, throughout the year to June 22nd. That's when it's northernmost furthest point. So you get on to another question here shortly. I'll have to get back to this idea in a moment. But yeah, that's what creates the seasons. The direct sunlight coming from it when it's furthest from us, when it appears to be making a smaller circle, gives the northern summer. Then when it descends and gets further south, that's why the southern side, the outer side of the equator, has much longer and hotter summers. Why natural skin tones get darker and darker towards the equator and then get darker still the further south you go. This is all natural observation, direct correlation to the sun itself, the Son of God, the giver of life, the giver of light, the giver of all that energy to the Mother Earth. Everything is the children of the Mother. The Father is the giver of life, and we live in the realm or the womb of the Mother Earth, the divine Mother Earth, cloaked in blue. How Mother Mary is always presented, cloaked in blue, because that's what she wears. She wears the most beautiful blue garment, the sky. So, both the sun and moon, are you able to give figures on the size of both the sun and moon on the flat earth model? No. You cannot give a size to an apparition, which is what the sun is. And the reason why the sun always appears the same size, whether it's furthest away from us highest or closest to us in the south, is because we are seeing an apparition of the sun. And that apparition is always caused at the same height in the atmosphere that it always appears. That's why it appears to be moving north and south, whereas it's just moving up and down. I know it's almost like a contradiction in a way, but it's almost like everywhere you look. I think I explained it this way the other day in a conversation. It's like the atmosphere, it's a plane up really high, but consider it like a sheet of cardboard. And so where every viewer is looking up at the sun, you're creating a direct line of sight, like you're poking a string right between you and the sun. And that's what giving you your apparition of the sun here across your sheet. It's, of course, not a sheet like a physical cardboard, but just bear with me and think of that. So a person over here looking up at the sun is seeing their personal hole of the sun in the atmosphere over here. So we've got like two different suns with one actual source at the very top, the all-seeing eye at the top. But where we see it, two completely different places here and here. And then every single person all across the plane is looking up through a different part of the atmosphere and seeing it in a slightly different place. So even though we're all looking up at the same sun and seeing the same thing, it is a completely different apparition as far as its location that you think you're seeing it at. And so that's just pretty much how it works. So you cannot measure the size of an apparition. You can measure what you estimate to be the size, but there's no other known variables. Like even when we send something up into the atmosphere using a barometer to measure how high it is, well, these barometers are calculated at sea level at one atmosphere. And so as they're going up with less and less atmosphere on them, they are possibly telling a false reading of how actual high they really are. So you might go up 2 miles, but it tells you you've gone 3. And because everything diminishes so quickly, the diminution effect, things shrinking, you just believe you're at 3 miles because it tells you you're at 3 miles, but you might only be at 2. You don't know. There's no way of knowing because your gauges are all based on quite primitive technology, really. And either way, you're still only going to be measuring through the air. The only way you can ever really know for sure is to send up, say, a hot air balloon, and be the easiest way, with a fishing line attached to it, something you can actually measure physically, so that once you know it's gone 5 miles up high, you'll know how big it will appear. I doubt a hot air balloon could even go that high, but assume it had some sort of assistance. Then you've got a physical, true measurement of the actual height and distance. And if then you can use photography and take images of the balloon at that height, use the same settings to take a picture of an aeroplane and knowing the size of each of them, make comparisons, then you've got maybe some sort of standard. You can then compare that to the sun. But even then, even then, you're still fraught with problems because you still don't know the actual size or distance of the sun itself. So, yeah, to ask for heights, sizes, and all that sort of thing to do with the sun, in reality, that's why it's fraught with so many problems. This is why scientists for the last couple of hundred years have had such wildly varied estimates of the actual height of the sun, starting from 3 million up to 115 million, now down to, say, 93 million. They're all nothing like one another to each other. Just because we now agree it's 93 million, well, we don't, but you guys do, because science told you. An authoritative figure that you believe and trust has told you this. You say, well, they've done the work. Why should we doubt them? And that's pretty much how religion has always worked. These are the men of knowledge. They've done the work. We should trust them, repeat them, and spread it as the gospel truth. Heliocentrism 101. Sorry, the more I talk, the thirstier I get. You now have provided reasons to how the sun and moon both set below the horizon rather than stay in the air and grow distant on a flat earth. I did mention that already, yeah. Convergence. Convergence is a real thing. You see the floor away from you appearing to rise up. You see the ceiling appearing to sink down. The higher the ceiling in your room, the steeper the angle it will appear to sink down into the distance. And the further across the floor you can see, the more it will rise up to eye level, which is why when you go to the ocean, 6 foot above the sea level, it appears to rise up all the way to the horizon, where your eyes are on the horizon. And that's about a 3-mile distance. However, if you were to send a boat out and use a zoom lens and have something to actual focus on, you would see that that obscurity point isn't really quite as decidedly fixed and flat and definite as you would think. In fact, the further and further this boat goes and the more you can zoom in on it, the more you realise, it's vanishing into an obscurity point, but it can still be seen. And if it's a very tall ship, the top of it can be seen for quite a long distance, while the bottom is obscured by this convergence point. Everything converges towards the center, but because the air is see-through, the boat is going to be visible for much longer. And this is what's happening with the sun and the moon. They appear to set behind the convergence point because being up so much higher, following a parallel line, the further they go, the lower they will appear till eventually they are obscured. It's quite straightforward. In fact, that's what the Freemasonic symbol is all about. The compass with the all-seeing eye at the top and the set square at the bottom. Why is it called a set square? And why is their motto saying always on the level? Because the person viewing from down here sees the ground appearing to rise up to eye level. And as the sun moves away, it appears to go in this great pyramid line. As it comes up in the morning, there's your midday point. Back down, there's your set point. That is how perspective works to the knowledgeable person on the level. He sees the ground appearing to rise up in a set square. Why would they call it a set square? Why wouldn't you just call it a square? But no, it's a set square for that very reason. The all-seeing eye is the sun going around and around, appearing to go in a pyramid line. And if you know anything about pyramids, you know that they're all centered around sun worship and earth worship. You know, they show the coordinates of the earth. They are often aligned with star systems, like the Great Pyramids of Giza are aligned with Sirius, the Sirius star system, still to this day, many thousands of years later, proving that we're not hurtling through space. So that's why our constellations are all constant, because they are. The Earth is fixed, and it's the stars moving as one body around us. And so on a certain day of the year, they will align perfectly with the Pyramids of Giza, exactly as they showed us thousands of years ago. So there's your sunset and sunrise for both the sun and the moon below the horizon, rather than stay in the air and grow distant on a flat Earth. And if you were to get up higher, as I explained before, you will still see it again and again and again. If you got up high enough and zoomed in on the sun, you will see it appear as a tiny dot on the horizon. And even when it's so far enough away that it's not near enough to make your particular atmosphere continue to glow because of its distance, you'll still be able to see it. So, yeah. So when you say this implies the sun is setting below the horizon, impossible on a flat Earth, it is simply showing your own ignorance, son. Son, you're not the sun. Sunshine. Why can I see the sunset multiple times by changing altitudes in a helicopter? It's exactly what I just explained to you, mate. Is that by getting up higher, you can see further. And so things distant come back into view. As I explained before, if it's gone behind a curve as the ball is spinning away from the sun, so the sun is setting behind it, going up in a helicopter from the center of gravity is going the wrong direction to get back over the curve to see the sun. Only possible on a flat Earth if you apply some critical thought without trying to look for confirmation bias where your preconceived ideas. Why am I not able to zoom in on the sun and bring it back into full view if all it's doing is growing distance? Well, for the same reason, as I said, that once it's obscured by the obscurity point, you have to go higher to see it. You can't see through the water, so zooming in on it will not allow you to see it without gaining height. But by staying at the same height, all you're doing is magnifying what's visible part of it is still left. Same as with the ship. You're not going to bring the entire ship back in once it's past that point, but you can still magnify the part which is still visible and not obscured by it. Only possible on a flat Earth where everything converges to the center point. You understand? Convergence. It's the only way to understand the view of reality, no matter how you think of it. If you think of it as being on a spinning ball, there's no reason why that water would be rising up to your eye level in the first place at all, ever. There's no reason for it to. It should all just be sloping away straight away, and the horizon shouldn't be 3 miles away at all, except, of course, the measurements for the globe are back-engineered on the face of the fact we're on a flat Earth, and that's where convergence occurs in the first place. So you're taking real data of the flat Earth and interpreting it into your ball model because you want to believe we're on a spinning ball. Simple as that. The fact you can't do this proves around Earth. No, well, it proves you don't understand perspective and convergence and why things get obscured due to convergence. Even the law of perspective dictates it should be simply growing distant. Yep, until you add convergence. How can someone in Argentina face due south and someone in Australia face due south, nearly opposite directions on the AE map, and both see the Southern Cross constellation? Yes, we don't see it at the same time. Night is different. When we're in nighttime, they're in daytime. When they're in nighttime, we're in daytime. We see it at night, and we see it go across to the far west, which means it's still traveling, and it will keep traveling, as all the stars do, around Polaris. The further south they are, then obviously the faster they are moving, because as you see in time-lapse footage of stars around Polaris, the ones further away from it, making the bigger circles, are keeping up at the same distance as the ones nearer to it. So therefore we can conclude that the ones in the far south are going even faster still. So by the time they go around over to South Africa, that's when it's their nighttime, they continue going. South America now sees them. Then by the time they get back to our nighttime again, we can see them again in the southeast and watch them heading westwards, back over Western Australia, back over South Africa, back to South America. And it shows that the world is probably actually a lot smaller than we're really told. We're told that simply because the equator exists at the point where Polaris is no longer seen, that's your cutoff point for Polaris, hence why they call it the equator. But they continue making their maps in ever-increasing circles. And that's where it all goes wrong. That's where it all goes pear-shaped, because obviously that's not how it's going. How it actually goes, we don't know, because you can't really measure distance in a ship. You can only really measure average speed and estimated distance. That's where they kept getting it all wrong all the time. But if they kept basing it with the AE projection by saying, well, it's on a globe coming back down, but we make our map projected out flat, that's where all the distances are all wrong on the AE map. It doesn't work that way. It does work closer to possibly to globe measurements, except it's not a globe. So that's why the maps are so wrong, and there's really nothing we can do about it until somebody gets the knowledge and the wherewithal to know how to do something about it. We don't know how to do it. These maps have been around for hundreds, thousands of years, and that's all we've had to work with. People navigating by the stars, people using charts, people using a compass to make circles around the northern centre where the magnetic compass is always pointed towards, which aligns with Polaris. I don't care how much you tell me, give or take, magnetic north is aligned with Polaris, bullshit nonsense. As far as I'm concerned, it's near enough, good enough. That's how it's been done for centuries. That's how all the maps are made, and that is why they get so wrong once Polaris goes out of view, because they're just assuming that these latitude lines are getting in bigger and bigger and bigger circles around it, whereas it's possibly not. These continents are much nearer and closer than we're told, and hence why, well, I didn't even finish that before about the stars. If they're all moving as one around Polaris, and we say that they're going the opposite direction in the south, well, you think about that. If you're looking towards the Polaris, when you can see it in the north, you see it that way. But when you start looking with your back to it, the stars still going the same way will appear to look as though they're going in the opposite direction, because you got your back to it and looking at them in another way. It's really quite simple, something you can try at a disco with a disco ball in the middle of the room. Look at the lights on the ceiling. See how they're all spinning around the disco ball? Turn around and look the other way, and you'll see they're still going that way, but they look to be going a different way. It's all pretty well logical when you stop and think about it. Hello, hippie, you're back. Guys, at the time already. Shit, 20 to 6. North Island. Cheers, party pack. Could be doing a figure 8. Yeah, I should have read these earlier, eh? Chillstar, how you doing, mate? Yeah, party pack, could it be doing the figure 8? That's what the sun and element is actually showing that it does. I'm still working on making a video presentation one of these days from a couple of months back now, which is going to show actual diagrams of all these things. The sun and a lemma, as we know, the figure 8 is always drawn with a smaller circle on top. That's the traditional way of drawing the figure 8, because the figure 8 comes from the symbol of infinity, which is taken from the path the sun takes every year. And that's why the smaller part is on the top, because the top is where it's furthest away from us. The two crossover points are the equinoxes, and as it comes back south, that's where it makes the bigger part. But both sides are actually the same size. The reason the bottom part looks bigger is because it's closer. And when things are closer, they appear bigger. The sun itself always appears the same size the whole time. Just the path it takes, smaller at the top, bigger at the bottom. That's why in the south, it is much bigger, the outer side of the equator, because the inner part is always the smaller part. It's a reflection of the Earth itself. The equator in the middle is also the equinoxes. It's all actually a very beautiful, mystical sort of understanding once you grasp it all in one big biteful. Hard to do, I know. I'm still going to try and answer some of the rest of these questions. Just recently, Jupiter was extremely close to the Earth, so close, in fact, you could see its moons literally orbiting the planet. Well, I don't know about that. I could see quite a few bright planets quite often, but I couldn't see moons. I don't have a telescope, couldn't be bothered to look at one. Please explain this with the flat Earth model, void of your non-existent gravity that's just buoyancy and density. Address later. Quite simply, the wandering stars, pretty much what you describe as lesser gods, lesser beings, or greater beings. I don't put up a CC cleaner alert right now. They are literally, all the sonoluminescent beings are highly intelligent, advanced, spiritual beings. Angels, if you wish. Great souls, if you wish. Higher intelligences, if you wish. The wandering stars, if you track them over a period of time, you'll see that they move in sacred geometric patterns throughout the course of their cycles. And then they come back to where they started again. They move independently throughout the heavenly bodies. heavenly body as one. So when we talk about seeing moons around certain celestials, such as the wandering stars, as far as I'm concerned, these are their personal disciples. They've decided this is the God that we are going to worship, as the ancient Egyptians often did. They had multiple various gods, and people sort of treated one another as, oh, well, you worship the house of Isis, you worship the house of Horus, or whatever. And it wasn't taken as, oh, you're wrong, our God is greater than your God, sort of thing. No, everybody just accepted people for what they were and what they did and said, oh, well, you appeal to your gods, we'll appeal to our gods. And this is basically what the moons are. They're just greater souls. I'd love to silence them with a musical bitch slap, mate, but as I said, it's the sound sounds terrible on this. I haven't got my guitar ready. I'll have to go find a song, and I'd rather just laugh at Archimedes and I. Have you eaten a nice steak yet, Ross? Not since I was a child. Well, I found consuming dead flesh to be a favourable thing to do, but as I grew up, I found it to be not such a good thing to be doing, because when you fill your sacred temple with dead corpses, you are what you eat. So what may be useful when you're starving, when you're a child, and when you inherited certain traits from your ancestors, you can wean yourself off this stuff and become a living spirit who does not need to fill their body with dead animal corpses in order to feel like you're a man. Oh, but that beer is sweet, almost too sweet. P900 saw the moons. As I say, maybe you can see the moons. I'm not saying they don't exist, but I don't think that they're moons. You know, we can see all sorts of orbs. One of my favourite things is, well, I really should start a proper folder and really start saving some, but I got quite a number of photos that I've personally taken, and a number of others I've been collecting. You get quite a lot of them from the Philippines, where you get orbs in pictures that make no sense. You know, if it's a speck of dust, then why are these specks of dust all showing similar traits and almost look identical to what stars look like when zoomed in on? You know, they're basically a white orb. You got a ring, a brighter white ring just near the outside, and you've got a white dot in the center, and sometimes you even got what looks to be a face or some other sorts of things within the orb. And so that's pretty much the form a spirit takes once it's left its body. Some of them with very powerful intentions and so on, or maybe some very traumatic experiences when they left the body, might not even know they're dead, might still take on the apparition of what they feel they are in, like a human body, which is where you get ghosts from, ghost stories and so on. You know, there's enough evidence to say that they are real. I don't know what you believe personally. It's irrelevant. You can either believe it or not, but I think that spirit, when it takes a form, takes on the form of an orb. And that's what stars are. They're just greater intelligent consciousnesses glowing, and they show up in photographs from these lesser trapped ones on Earth. Now, I've seen pictures from somebody sent from a place in, I think it was Victoria or South Australia, might even be somewhere near Canberra, of a forest at night, and the number of orbs that showed up in that particular one. And we all heard of Min lights in Australia. These are lights that appear to follow you that look like an orb, and they can be different colours, you know, blue, green, orange. And some people get quite freaked out by them, as you probably would if you're out in the middle of the bush somewhere and you've got this light following you around and you've got no idea what it is. It can be pretty scary stuff. Meat heals. Yeah, tell that to the cow you stole it from. That's interesting, Fyodor Dostoevsky, because where I live, there's a place called Cavern Bar, and that's not too far from the word Canberra, really, is it? But Cavern Bar is the traditional name for Byron Bay, which also meant meeting place. So good to see you know a little bit about Australian history and culture. But yeah, Cavern Bar, Cavanbah, is the traditional name for Byron Bay, the meeting place, which is also the easternmost point of the Australian mainland. Canberra, when you look at it on a map these days, I did one the other day. I'll try and remember to upload that. It's on the phone still, where I found this 20-cent piece. I was doing some experiments, and it's actually got a map of Canberra mapped out on it, and it's full of Freemasonic symbolism. Unbelievable. Hexagrams, pentagrams, hexagons, you name it, pyramids, all-seeing eyes. So Canberra is, the Australian Freemason capital of Australia, yeah, for sure. And it's also a territory, much like everywhere else where they've developed separate territories, such as Washington, D.C., District of Columbia. That's not actually part of the United States of America. It's a separate colony, just as the Vatican. Vatican City is its own city within Italy, I believe. Better test that one. Rome. Yeah, somewhere over there. And London City, of course, being the other axis of evil in the far north. They're the ones that control the money, the banking system. The Vatican's the religious system, and of course Washington D.C. the war system. That's the axis of evil, all working together to keep humanity enslaved. So yeah, I'm just going to go back to doing this. I wasn't going to go nearly as long as this either. I've already gone over an hour. I was only going to do half an hour. So then we're going to go to his next one that says, can you explain why Barrow, Alaska has a period each year where they won't have sunlight for an entire 67 days while still being able to explain lunar phases? Are you able to explain why Barrow, Alaska sees 80 plus days of nothing but sunlight without breaking the model used to explain the previous question? Well, yeah, let's stop it there. Yes, sir, I can. And that is what I've been explaining, about why when the sun gets higher and higher, gets further from us, it appears to be making a smaller and smaller circle. So places like Barrow, Alaska, being so much further towards the inner northern side of the Earth, are able to see the sun as it's furthest from us. Still making the same size because it's still making the same apparition in the atmosphere that everybody sees it through, but it's visible. And I think it does like this sort of big sort of S wave as it goes around, because that sort of shows that it's still going around the North Pole, still going around the equator, but at other times it's more distant. That's what makes it appear to go low. Then as it gets nearer, it appears to come up. As it goes away, it gets lower again. It's all distance perspective and height perspective and perspective. So when it's further south, lower towards the ground, poor Barrow in Alaska is so far away from it now because it appears so much lower that it's obscured the whole time. So it does its 80 plus days of complete darkness. This is why the ancient people, superstitious people, would say that the Son of God has died and descended into the underworld for 3 days and nights. And then when they see it come back again 3 days after the winter solstice, they say the Son of God is born again, and they still celebrate the birth of the Son of God on December 25th to this day. That's a tradition that's been going on by the Northerners for as long as time immemorial. It's all, again, perspective. It didn't go into an underworld just because it was obscured by it. It's sort of a bit of superstitious nonsense, but these people were able to dry out their fly agaric mushrooms underneath their pine trees, and on the solstice they would go on a bit of a astral travel and see the Southern Cross, because they're following the sun, and they say, oh, that's where it's died. It's died on the cross in the south. That's why they say the Son of God dies on the cross, and 3 days later comes back from the underworld and returns again. And then the whole new year system for the north begins all over again, the whole seasons. And all their holy days are to do with everything to do with the seasons, with the sun, with the spring equinox, with the moon phases. They're all tied together. And so all the holy days are based on sun worship. Not my fault. Oh yeah, that's what I prepared earlier. Always have a backup plan. Horus. I retracted a message there, Ultimate Hermit. The sun's path, it is the sine wave-based reality, yes. In a way, it just depends on your distance from Polaris as to how much of a sine wave you see. And I think you can go too far and not see it as much. It will become less and less of one. certain point, be the perfect sine wave. Too far south, outer, as we are, all we see is less of the sun going far north in the sky, basically, as it rises in the northeast, sets in the northwest. It's quite cold still, but once this rain clears, hopefully the days will slowly start to get longer. In fact, we're really going into our coldest part of winter now, even though the sun is on its way back down. That's absolutely right, Juan Carlos. Without the sun, there would be no life as we know it, but also without the earth, because, you need a medium within which to grow life. And the earth is pretty much the most heavily overlooked part of this equation. That's what men have done, because men cannot create life, women give life. We've basically destroyed the Mother Earth aspect of our spirituality. That is what we have to retake back. We've got the father son, we've got all that male energy. But all that male energy, it's I guess you could look at it in a way. In the balanced world, you've got 6 and 9, and that's the yin and yang symbol together. And if you actually look at a full moon the next time, you will see a crude sort of yin yang symbol, which is what it was supposed to have been in the first place, creating perfect balance, masculine energy and feminine energy. Or feminine energy is the 6, masculine energy is the 9, which tipped on the side is also the symbol of Cancer, the crab, which is the sign that the sun enters into when it reaches the peak and enters into Cancer. That's when it's the homecoming sign. So it's coming back home again now. And so symbolism has been used since forever. 6 and 9 creates perfect balance. 6 represents like the letter B, baby, boobs, the womb, the pregnant woman. 9 is the male aspect, and that represents the sperm, the spear, the penetrating force. And that is why the sun, with all its penetrating rays, constantly out all the time, like spears, is the masculine energy. The feminine energy comes from the earth, which balances it. So we as the children are supposed to be able to balance this energy. That's why in the 6 of the yin-yang symbol, you've got a little bit of the masculine, and in the 9, you've got a little bit of the feminine. We're supposed to balance one another without being too much of one or the other. I could go into that into even far more depth if I really had the time to. But if you were to look down at a full moon phase at the Earth, you would see a yin-yang symbol, sort of. I don't know if it would make the perfect 6-9 S in the center of it, but the sun would appear to be a black hole surrounded by white light, whereas the moon would appear to be a white hole surrounded by black light. That's your yin and yang symbol. The moon is feminine, the sun is masculine. But in reality, the Mother Earth is the egg that holds it all within. It's the giver of life, the womb. The sun without the earth is basically nothing. It's just a little speck in a star in a jar type of thing. But the earth is the most important thing. And this is why we have been fooled by the heliocentrists, by sun worshippers, and live in such warring world, because we've lost the divine feminine and respect for the Mother Earth and her angels. See, we can drive a motor car with no thought for the pollution that is causing into the Mother Earth's lungs. And it is said that what we do to her, we are doing to ourselves. So we pollute her lungs, we pollute our lungs. We pollute her water, we pollute our water. We could create disease. How do we cure disease? By going back to nurturing and healing the Mother Earth, by working with her angels, by purifying the air, by only growing crops that don't require toxins, that require poisons to enter our streams, by not flushing our shit into the streams, by building up our streams. I have a massive plan on how we can fix all that. I will talk about that on a future video again, but it's all to do with cannabis, hemp. That is the cure for all our ills. If we just straight away turn all our fields currently growing cotton, tobacco, wheat, you name it, started growing hemp across the board, we will solve all our problems in next to no time, and we will build the greatest empire you could ever imagine in the history of mankind, as well as end all our other problems such as fuel shortages, paper wastage, building products, food, everything gets solved by hemp. As soon as we remove the evil men from power who have basically ignored everything to do with the sacredness of our earth, these sun worshippers, these elite who think that they can control our minds, they've lost control. That's where flat earth is winning. But we have to bring back our understanding and comprehension of the divinity of the flat earth. That is the most important thing to get back into our minds. It's not just about the shape, it's about the essence, the life, that we are the children of Mother Earth and the Father Son. We are the living consciousness. We're pretty fucking special. We are. We should be singing a song every day in praise of our mother and our father. Not just the father, because that leads men into war, into destruction, into fucking up and raping and fracking the divine Mother Earth. You would never do such a thing to your own dear mother. Why are we doing it to the Mother Earth? Because we've been given no other options. We've been told this is what you need to do to survive. You've got to get a job, boy. You've got to go out and get paid to do the dirty work and bring home the bacon and all the rest. So I think I've addressed some of his posts by now. Running out of time. I've got stuff simmering away up there, making another home brew, which I really should get back to before I overdo it. I just read a couple more comments here. Use poop as fertilizer. Damn straight, mate. Absolutely. Terrarium. Oh, I might even turn this off for a second because I like these comments now. Fuck that, dudes. Chills the Deluxe says, great explanation. Thanks, mate. Let's face it, without the sun will be no life as we know it. That's exactly it. A living entity known as the tardigrade refutes line. They can survive space. Allegedly. Terrarium. It's pretty much what it is. It's a closed system. Even that weirdo actor guy, that Bill Nye, the science guy, says it's a closed system. It is a terrarium. You can actually, you've seen that guy who's got that great big bottle. It's got a plant in there that's been like in there for I don't know how many decades in a closed system. You know, it's as it decomposes, the rotting parts go back into feeding itself and all the water stays locked in. If we're within a dome, we're within a closed system, just on a much bigger scale. So we're in a terrarium, absolutely. I usually joke and call them retardigrades. They are microscopic creatures which can survive in conditions entirely alien to Earth. Well, that's interesting, Fiona. Hope I pronounced that right that time, because I thought you were leaving ages ago, but you're still hanging around, so that's cool. When I hear space, Hollywood basement comes to mind. Might be a final frontier, but it's me in the Hollywood basement. I did flat eartherize that song. I don't even know when the flat earth songbook's gone, to be honest. Now I think of it, I'd be tempted to sing that. The Chinese way. Every culture always recycled their sewage back into the soil. That's what you do. I was reading this one on permaculture some years back. Say you've got a selenium shortage in your soil. I think that was the one they used, selenium, one of the essential nutrients. Or say you put some selenium into your diet, and then when you compost your waste and turn it back into the soil, and then you keep eating the plants again, you no longer have a selenium shortage. Whatever the case may be, whatever you're suffering a shortage of, it's because you keep taking expensive supplements and flushing them down the toilet. Put them back into the soil, put them back into your food. Then you don't have to keep taking supplements. They're in your food perpetually. The food cycle is a perpetual motion machine. And the way, if we do it properly, means that the ground itself keeps rising up every single season. That is what the living Mother Earth is all about, is keeping it above and rising. That is why sea levels have always been rising, always. You think of Gondwana land, where Australian mainland and Tasmania and New Guinea were all attached to one, so we're told. I don't know, I wasn't there. I don't remember being there. proves that the sea levels have always been rising, regardless of what we do. What we should be doing as the caretakers of the Mother Earth is mulching the soil. But instead, we build roads and drains and we flush everything into the waterways and into the ocean. So we're losing all our valuable nutrients into the oceans, as well as stopping the living Mother Earth from continuing to grow. So the way that we make it continue to grow, my simple solution, is the first thing we do when we start growing fields of hemp is we get the inner herd, the inner stem, the herd, you mix that with lime and local sand or whatever you got, and you make it into bricks. These things petrify into stone over a period of time. This is called hempcrete. It is the permanent solution to fixing everything. It's what the pyramids are made of. They used to use hemp in everything. That's the secret ingredient that they're hiding from us. Is hemp herd and lime mixed together. So you mix it with a particular clay, you can sculpt the most beautiful clay sculptures, and then as it sets, it turns into marble. And you say, how the hell did somebody carve a fishing net out of marble? It's carved it out of soft plasticine, basically, and as it's set, it turns into stone, a beautiful carved artifact. This is how the ancients did everything. It was all done with hemp. That's the secret that they keep hiding from us. So we can do this on a really crude basis everywhere. Like Australia is obviously the place to do it. Olimaroa, the true name from the Aotearoans across the ditch, that give them the big island to the west. But Olimaroa, that's how we can do it with every single waterway, is start building them up. Start digging out the ditch next to the existing waterway, create a channel. Then the next year, you put another layer of bricks down the side. Then the next year, another layer. And keep building it up in stepped pyramid shapes so that no matter how much water you get into each of these channels over a period of time, you're still going to create a safe flow of water so that any animals or children, whatever, that fall into it aren't going to drown in a flood, for example. Then on the other side, you're stepping it down the other way, so you're stopping the cattle and whatever other animals you've got getting into the water and polluting it and having all that flush into the ocean as well. You're saving all your soil by composting, recycling, putting it back into the land, mulching. Every year, you're growing up more and more land, and you're creating a massive river system out of what was once a tiny stream. This is how we do it. Why not? Let's just get in and do it. You know, we've got people working for the dole. Let's just start with them. We've got refugees. They've got no homeland. We've got a massive desert here in Australia. There's nowhere for them to go out there. Hey, poop is fuel. Yeah, that is why they banned it. Absolutely, Chillster. They banned it because they knew how dangerous it was to the way they want to steal the wealth of mankind, of Aryan kind in particular. They hate us. They want to destroy us. But we're intelligent, so we find ways of fighting back. So they find laws. By way of deception shall they do war. So they've infiltrated all our governments. And they tricked the American government into banning hemp. Most of them had no idea when they found out, when they banned cannabis, they thought they were banning marijuana, which to them was explained an obscure Mexican tobacco that turns the Negroes into rapists. And obviously it was a race thing. So they banned marijuana. Little did they know they were banning the greatest crop known to mankind. 80% of all the world's tradable goods at that time were cannabis or hemp products. Medicinally, rope and canvas, obviously. Canvas being the Dutch word for cannabis. Canvas, all the great paintings of the world being painted on canvas. All the Bibles were printed on hemp paper. The flag was made out of hemp. Everything was made out of hemp. In fact, when World War II broke out, they forced farmers to turn at least 10% of their land into hemp production for the war effort. That's how important it was. But then, when it became peaceful times, who wanted to make all the money? These people who had the printing presses, because they wanted to use shit paper made from wood pulp from shit trees that didn't last anywhere near as long, but because they invested all their money into the wood pulp business and bleach, more pollutants to the earth. Well, hemp was the biggest competition to that, and because they owned the press, of course they didn't, and they could get the Arabs to pump it out of the ground and monopolise the whole market out of that, whereas the farmer could grow fields and fields of hemp and press that for oil and grow and get all the biodiesel he possibly needed to run all his machinery and the rest of the town's machinery. Every single car could be running on biodiesel. Every tractor, every generator, you name it. Whatever we're getting free from the earth to create free power, the wealth could be held by the people, by the farmers, by the local community, and the growing of the hemp in the first place makes it carbon neutral because the plants soak up more carbon than what gets produced by just the seed alone. And you've also got all your clothing, the hemp fibre, all your paper needs taken care of, all your building needs taken care of, permanent buildings, mind you, not these structures they give us that aren't even built to last for 30 years, 40 years, and they have to be demolished and another one put up in its place. Cannabis is the answer to everything. So yeah, of course they made it deliberately banned it from us. Cotton, inferior product, uses over 50% of all the bloody pesticides and herbicides. Who makes all the money out of them? Monsanto, I believe. Yeah, but cannabis doesn't need that. It outgrows the weeds, and there are no natural pests. And even if there were, so be it. It grows so well that if the birds come and eat some of the seed, they're welcome to it. It won't hurt. What the bugs eat doesn't really matter because they're really only wanting the plant fibre most of the case anyway, the herd for building materials, and the seed for fuel, food, cooking. We could even make canvas out of it, and by growing bamboo alongside as a companion crop, you've got tent poles, wrap canvas around it, instant shelter for homeless people everywhere you go, or for workers. Now, we don't all have to live in great big mansions. I'd love to live inside a TP, to be honest. You build a nice little rocket stove inside of it. Hey, happy days. So this concept of modern living with mod cons, it's cave dwelling. We're just in a modern form of cave, really. We could be living out amongst the stars. So on a good night, just go and sleep out underneath them. Why not? Who needs to live inside a cave with mod cons all their lives? Damn straight, Chillstar, 10% of his fields, the animals ate it. If we all had a distillery at home, we could all have clean water, alcohol, fuel, etc. Yep, for sure. A distillery could have multiple purposes too. That's another one of my weird inventions in the back of my head, where you're using your rocket stove to basically fuel everything, including a distillery. Use it to smoke some wood, which cooks your fish, if you like smoked fish, which I certainly do. Smoked vegetables is another nice way of cooking them too. I've just been eating some smoked garlic, good stuff. So as a result of smoking the wood, the leftover product is charcoal. Charcoal is very useful. It becomes activated carbon. In other words, to use that inside your water filters, which you're using inside your big aquaponics system to take the nasties out of the water, or the heavy metals. And then when you're making your hempcrete, you use your used up carbon back into your hempcrete as one of the building blocks within it, where you lock all the heavy metals back up into stone where they belong in the first place. Meanwhile, you've purified your water, you've got healthy living fish, the fish wastes are feeding your plants are feeding you, your wastes are feeding the soil further and further around. So you're creating more and more abundance and biodiversity every single step along the way. So this is something I've been heavily into all my life. Even if a lot of it is just hypothetically, I know it can be done. Okay. Just need the right group of people to get together and say, right, let's do this. It can be done. We need a bit of land. I had a piece of land perfectly selected some years back when it sold out from underneath me because I was unable to afford it. I was a little bit upset, but I thought, oh well, yeah, I tried. I tried to get a fundraiser going for it. I had one person give me $50 actually, and one person give me $20. So it's like, this is the sort of thing where I need like 500,000, 200,000. You know, land around here is expensive, but this 100 odd acres would have been perfect for such a thing, to set up a community where at least, you know, 10 to 20 families could quite happily live on it without being in each other's faces and still live in perfect abundance. But hey, the dream is still alive. It can be done, just not in that particular place. Dave Hinkle, g'day mate. Urine therapy. Well, I'm on the fence with urine therapy, Mr. Hermit. Some people believe in it. Good for them. If it works for them, good for them. I'm not into it. And I don't think I ever will be. Yeah, maybe someday I will be convinced, but at this stage I cannot be convinced. And even though some nights I do pee in a bottle to save me going up in the cold to go upstairs to the bathroom, when I empty it out in the morning, that garlicky smell is usually a bit too strong to even interest me in even considering putting it back in my mouth. There's just no way. So g'day Mark Swarbrick, how you doing mate? Theodore comes back and says Australia is always catching up. America and Canada realise weed should be legal. It will take at least 5 years in Australia. They will wait for England. Yeah, I don't know how we're going to go about it. Thanks, Chilster. I like to think I know a fair bit about the stuff that I talk about. Aluminum, or aluminium as we call it, so Juan Carlos says, and glyphosate can synergistically induce pineal gland pathology, connection to gut dysbiosis and neurological disease, aluminium from geoengineering, glyphosate from weed cure. Absolutely. That was the one I couldn't think of the other day, was barium. But there's another meme getting around at the moment showing barium and aluminium. The scientific names for them are BAAL, the two things in chemtrails that they're raining down upon us. Baal. Oh, what a coincidence that is. That was when I stopped actually smoking weed myself, around the same time I really noticed chemtrails, because I noticed, because I only ever smoked good bushweed, was that it was making me feel like I'm going a bit senile. And beer hasn't been much better, I must admit. Oh, this is a show one. Let me click on show, because I can't do that afterwards, I've discovered, if I don't find the comment at the time. I've got a link there. I'll check that out later. Yuan. Stuff at Mini TV Adventures. I mean, a lot of people are tuned into what is going on. I just happen to be, I think, a little bit more tuned in than most, simply because I've always done my own thing. I haven't, played to the crowd. I've never played to please the crowd at all. When I had my business, this was back when I first noticed chemtrails, was I had a pet store in Byron Bay. My wife was pregnant with our third child, and it was around the time of one of the outdoor festivals when all of a sudden everybody started getting sick, and I noticed something was definitely not right with the weather. I was very tuned in with the weather. Now, as a surfer, that's what you do. You tune in with the weather. The weather is everything. Do I go surfing today? What are the tides doing? What's the moon phases? When is the tide going to be running out? When will be the best breaks? You live and breathe the water cycles, the ocean, the weather. And even though I wasn't surfing so much at that time, because by now I had a family, that was our third child, running a business, I still understood the weather intrinsically. And then I talked to all the other local businesses, and 4 out of 6 of their staff were all off sick at the same time. My wife got diagnosed with atypical pneumonia, 6 months pregnant. She nearly died. She got sent to the hospital. The hospital didn't know what to do with her, because they want to put her in the maternity ward. Oh, no, but we don't want the other women or babies to get sick, so we'll put her in this other place. And then they said, oh, yeah, but with all those old people, we don't really want them to get sick either. The hospital's overflowing with people at this particular time suffering from atypical pneumonia. And it's not just the normal flu or pneumonia, it's atypical. That's how they described it. When my daughter was born, 3 months later, she survived it. She had this little hole just in under her neck, under here, They used to always weep a little bit of pussy stuff. Made me wonder if perhaps they had a big needle and took a bit of a sample out of her using a bit of ultrasound and stuff. Because I was hardly able to visit. I was running the business and looking after my other two little babies, basically. A 2 and a 3-year-old. They weren't even that. 1 and a 2-year-old. So it was tough times. But man, it made me wonder, did they take a sample from her? Did they somehow find a cure to some sort of disease, perhaps from a baby whose mother was suffering from this atypical pneumonia? Did she have some sort of antibodies that others didn't have? Anyway, she still has this tiny little hole in her neck to this day, which still weeps a little bit occasionally. So we don't know what it is. It's all hypothetical. But the thing is, as a result of that, it made me curious, and I was just starting to get into the internet at that time. She's now 21. So I'm just starting to get into the internet, and I was curious. So on one of the pages, I asked people, what do they know about chemtrails? I started seeing them spraying them. I started seeing the results. And so over all these years, I've been noticing the results of chemtrails and what they're doing to our population. And I can tell you right now, there are a lot of sick people at this moment who are suffering. We had a big cold snap last week, or was it just the week before? And all chemtrail related. And I reckon they did another dump. They're doing another experiment of another type of flu. This is one that people who've even taken their flu injections are still getting really, really sick from. That was where I first started coming up with the idea, well, how do we protect ourselves from this? We obviously can't go around shooting down planes. Maybe we can build protective domes. Maybe if we built them big enough, we can build an entire town within it where you don't have any sort of outdoor burning, because that uses up your oxygen, but just grow masses and masses of food and crops to build up the oxygen levels. All of a sudden, you've also now eliminated a heap of other problems we have. Like you can control the temperature to be an efficient 24 degrees all year round, all day long. You no longer have raining. You then don't really need clothing as much. You might want to wear a bit out of modesty. You don't really need housing as much. You can just live in a hammock in a tree. You've actually solved so many problems that exist in this outer world, and all that water is recollected in the dome, comes back around the side, and you've got purified water from, well, it's purified by the sun. It's a self-distilling system. And as I say, by growing heaps of fish, aquaponics, heaps of food, you get to spend all your day sitting around making music, making love, making fine artwork, and living life the way it should be, not as a freaking slave in this man-made system designed to fucking destroy the earth, selling us a dream of traveling to Mars. Who needs that shit? Why don't we make this place paradise? This one here, the only one we got. That's what we should be doing. Frankenstein's the movie. Yeah, look, the way they've been messing with our weather for so long now, it's militarized. We know they've been doing this for a long time, militarizing our weather. Gets me try not to think about it really. Anyway, I have beer to go and make and stuff. So it's been great talking to you. Hopefully we can catch up again another time, because I've really enjoyed this. I wish I didn't have other stuff to go and do, because I could sit here all night and keep yakking on. But there are things to do, and I nearly got through that dude's comment, but hey, it got somewhere else instead. It inspired something. So thanks for dropping by. Really appreciate it. As I say, I'm not in it for popularity and likes and subscribes and all that sort of shit. So do that if you wish. We'll catch up another time. I think there's another guy. Would I be able to find him if I looked here? I will. I'll look up here. It loads up. There's another fella called, it loads up, Alexander Nicole. Or maybe I shouldn't have said his real name out loud. His name is instead GeoStreamer, and he wants to have a chat coming up this weekend, which will be Saturday the 6th around 9 UTC. So I don't know what that is for me here, but I'm trying to work it out still. Yeah, it's good that people want to come and chat. Yeah, have live discussions, live debates. I'm always open for it. In fact, if anybody knows how to set up a live discussion amongst flat earthers, I'll be more than welcome to come along and have my say on various things. I know I'm controversial in all circles. As I say, I'm not doing it to be popular. I've put a lot of flat earthers offside over the last couple of years, especially when some of them are biblically encouraged or inspired, and they say things like, well, the Bible says that the moon is its own light, or it's a lesser light to rule the night. And I say, well, no, it actually is reflected sunlight, even though reflected isn't technically the correct word. Illuminated by is a better word. At the half moon phase, you will see the shadows of the craters, which only come from that side. You can hold a ball in front of it in daytime and see the exact same phase cast on the ball by the sun. There's so many things to say that the moon does not produce its own light. And when you understand that by being up that high, that is why it can capture sunlight 24/7, it's all pretty well straightforward. So sometimes telling people that when they think they found something new, that, oh no, it produces a cooling light, that it's its own light and different and special. Sometimes it's nearly not quite what you'd like to think it to be. You have to analyse everything critically with a 100% honest attempt. Honest to yourself, honest to the conditions, honest to the data that's presented, and interpret it correctly. Quite often we just see something, and like you see this from the globers all the time. They say that this can only happen on a globe, whereas when you think about it, it's like, actually it's only possible on a stationary plane. If you analyse the data correctly, don't fall back on your assumption biases and realise that actually it becomes impossible on a globe. Nearly everything that they say that it's only possible on a globe. So that's me for today. Keep it flat. Alrighty, Mr. P. I'll try and find one, but if my guitar's out of tune. It's not here, it's not here. All right. I will do a song just because it was asked for. There it is. Guitar would help. Give it a quick tune up, but I'm telling you already in advance that the sound comes through shit on this microphone. Yep. That'll do. It's all a bit highly strung. I wonder if putting a dampener on the microphone will help. I don't know how to do that. Close enough. Glad I tuned it because they're all out. Ooh. I said 33. Close enough. Oh, I don't need glasses. This isn't going to go well, you know that, because I lost my good glasses. These ones I can't see properly through. I'm going to have to move closer, in which case, yeah, I know that the microphone is not going to like it if I get too close. So bear with me. There we go. Cleared some space. All right, going out with a song, which I can't even read because of the glare. Heliocentric sun worship, Masonic illumination. Gravity's a glue that keeps us down upside hallucinations. We're faster than the speed of sound, it's spinning ball of magic. Where's the edge of the world? Just look at Antarctic exploration. I dropped the fishbowl projector, but it decides each and every nation. It's understood that Hollywood sells spinning ball with magic. Sell the globe well, very well, put it into every classroom. Spinning on a ball, feeling nothing at all, surrounded by a vacuum. A blue marble to fool us all. Dream of spinning ball as magic. Dream of spinning ball as magic. Oh Christ, it seems you're the Son of God with your very own constellations. The Savior of the world, it's told, just believe you'll have salvation. While Mother Earth gets raped and franked for the greed of their starvation. Space might be the final frontier, but it's made in a Hollywood basement. Disseminating bullshit every day, disguised as entertainment. Do you hear the news? There's a new program selling spinning ball of magic. Born and raised by those who praise control of their slave nations. Nobody's ever been there on a shuttle to the space station. A blue marble, it's Photoshop to fool us all. It's exactly. Already done that. If you look into the flat earth truth, you'll find your mind awakening. The matrix lies right to your eyes, but the red pill is amazing. You're going better wake up soon, don't be a cow, stop grazing. The flat earth is the truth to all of your indoctrination. It served its purpose very well, born chained to the slave nation. I'm locked from the fall, I'm chained from it all. Awake from spinning ball of magic. To believe in such a big lie is tragic. Awake from spinning ball of magic. My control is so sadistic. Don't be fooled by the great deceiver. Lucifer, Satan, and God. Alrighty, I'm out of here. Have a good one, guys. Take care and be good.